you do a background check, DNA test, like this kid would be protected. You wouldn't just someone show up and say, hey, I'm his sponsor. Okay, have a nice day. It's so disgusting what we are doing. They used to call Trump a racist for his border enforcement policies. It's the opposite. It's what we're doing to foreign children and not treating them with the dignity that we would a U.S. child who turned up alone. I mean, it's the opposite. The only compassionate thing is enforce the border and de-incentivize these trafficking organizations from walking kids across. And when we talk about the economy of pedophilia, knowing that we have this huge population of pedophiles, it's obvious what's going on here. But no one seems to want to do anything about it in this administration.
Maybe it's not so obvious, and I know this is going to be hard for some of our audience to hear, but I want to hear, and I think it's important for us to hear. You use the example of a 5-year-old. What happens to a 5-year-old that comes in and then gets sucked into this sex trafficking in the United States? They've passed that sponsorship moment. Now they're shipped off. Right. What is the end scenario for that child? Can you give me a couple of sad examples of this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can give you there's if you watch Sound of Freedom, you'll see there's a scene. They actually filmed this scene exactly at the port of entry on the southern border where it happened. It's what kicks off the whole journey and the rescue journey. But a little boy had been kidnapped by a pedophile, an American pedophile who lived in San Bernardino, California, and was bringing him across the border. And the Customs and Border Protection officials identified, thank goodness for a wall, because a wall forced him into that funnel where he could be identified. That's walls save lives, right? Border enforcement saves lives. But they got the little boy out. But they discovered all these sex tapes in the van of this man sexually abusing a little boy. That led to raiding his house in San Bernardino, and we found 12 other kids. So what he was doing with them is a real example. When we raided his house on July 4th of 2006, we identified that he had basically a child porn studio built into his house, cameras everywhere. He was filming. He had a little production company, okay, for self-consumption mostly, I think. And he was making videos of these kids. He'd drug them up, rape them, take videos of it. Now, others would then distribute those videos, sell those videos, and then people would come and partake in sex. I'm not talking about this case in particular, but this is the type of case, and I'm kind of telling you what happens in other places. When there's been a 5,000% increase in child exploitation material. The U.S. is now one of the highest producers as well. So you can see there's probably a lot of production, a lot of selling these kids for sex. You can, if in the adult sex industry, whatever you pay in that given market, you're going to pay triple for a kid. So I know this because I've been in those situations buying and selling. And so it's very lucrative to have a child available.
Unbelievable.
We rescued a kid in Mexico last year. He'd been trafficked since he was 9 years old. I think we got him. He was like 11 now. I mean, he was $5,000 for 2 nights. An adult prostitute would be maybe $1,000 for 2 nights, depending. It's $5,000. And so that's why it's so lucrative.
Oh my God. And to think, we're just talking about like this sleazy guy in San Bernardino. But how high does this go? Does it go into Hollywood? Does it go into Jeffrey Epstein? Does it go into all of these billionaires that are associated with this? That's the $6 billion question. That's a $154 billion question right there. How high does this go? In your experience, does it go all the way to the top?
It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. It's one of these hidden crimes, where it's closet crimes. There's no profile for it. It's not always the greasy, dirty, looking dude. There is no profile. And we've arrested over in my career, clergymen, law enforcement officers, professionals of any kind, educators. Like it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I think the Jeffrey Epstein case is a good example of how it is in the highest levels. It's harder to get those guys, because they're so protected. And I do think that's one of the reasons you don't see more of this, and why there's this campaign to discredit, that it's even happening.
Right, right. Of course, they want to make it seem like it's fake. It's not really happening. This isn't a concern at the southern border, et cetera. And that's why we're trying to shed light on it here, because I don't absolutely stand for that. You, of course, mentioned Ukraine. You talked about and this is happening all over the world, but specifically, Mel Gibson reached out to you, actor Mel Gibson, and who had been starting to expose a lot of things in Hollywood over the years. And came to you, knew your name, and reached out to you to help with getting some children out of a really difficult situation. Can you talk about how, and then now I think because you've been filming it, there's a documentary coming together, and just tell me how you're associated with Mel Gibson. How did he reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Mel does so many good things behind the scenes, and cameras off, he's just doing good things. He cares deeply about causes and wants good for humanity, and especially for children. So he was filming back in Budapest at the time that the Russians invaded, and he knew me because he had just volunteered his help to give some amazing notes for the film Sound of Freedom. Of course, him and Jim Caviezel work closely together. The Passion, and it's been announced that they're going to be filming the Resurrection. So I don't know much about that, but anyway, so I got a very random phone call on the same day that the Russians had invaded, and he said he had a list. He had been collecting a list. People had been, from different people in his community about children who were orphans, and they were very worried about them because they're in the target zone of the war, and who's taking care of them, who's getting them out. And my wife was giving me a similar list. We have a program at OUR called Children Need Families, which sponsors adoptions. We had about 7 kids coming out of Ukraine last February. And so she was worried about them. So they both called. I had this list of names, and I called some friends of mine who I'm on their board called Aerial Recovery, and they go into hot zones and kind of help stabilize. And so we jumped on together and went into Ukraine and began the process of extractions, going into these places, and we got more names from the Ukrainian government of the orphans. And we saw horrible things, that sometimes the kids, it was too late. Sometimes, the caretakers were gone, but the kids were still there, and we got them out. So it was very successful. And, at one point I called Mel from Ukraine, and I just said, hey, I came, I'm here, and it's working. I said, but I'm going to do a documentary. DNA Films, the production company, is going to do a documentary on this. Tony Robbins is actually producing. Mel Gibson's not producing. I want to be very clear about that. That's the part. I don't know how that story got to that, but he definitely is not producing. But he said, I'll absolutely help you, any way I can. We thought it was going to be a one single series kind of thing of just helping kids in Ukraine. In the end, it's a 4-part series produced again by Tony Robbins. A couple other folks are also producing, and DNA Films. It's a 4-part series now, and the last 3 episodes aren't even in Ukraine because we had identified a pedophile ring that was trying to move children out of Ukraine. This was a Dutch pedophile group. They were a political party that had been disbanded. They got disbanded after we took them down, but they're a political party whose objective was to legalize sex with children.
Out of the Netherlands.
Out of the Netherlands, and they believed that children, if you could consent to eating ice cream or go to the park, that you could consent to having sex, and so that's the agenda they were peddling. They were all arrested. They're 4 leaders. They were all arrested, and awaiting trial for child crimes. Well, they all became fugitives, and the leader of the group we identified in Mexico. He was the one that we caught chatting with. Was an undercover cop from Holland who works with us about moving Ukrainian kids. So he said, I got the American who's doing it. He introduced them to me. And I'm like, here I am in Ukraine. And we were training, we then trained some Ukrainian operators who could help us because they could play that role. And then from there, we identified the guy. He was hiding out in Mexico City. So then we went to Mexico City. We identified him, worked with the Mexican officials. He was arrested. We found all his child exploitation material hidden, and he's in jail now. And then from there, we found out that 2 of his lieutenants were hiding out in Ecuador, and they were even more threatening. They had a child sex hotel. They had a hotel in a little village called Canoa, Ecuador. It's a cute little boutique kind of hotel, but they were using it and getting it ready to be a child sex destination. And they were already trying to advertise for it. They've already abused up to 400 kids. we've set up an aftercare shelter in the town because the kids are slowly coming forward and saying this happened to me, and we're taking care of them, feeding them. Crazy case. That whole operation in just 4 months, and this is unheard of. Like, especially in law enforcement, it's if I were restrained with the government restraint, we couldn't do this. But 4 short months, we went through 6 countries, 3 continents. And rescued what will probably amount to hundreds and even thousands of preventative rescues. The prosecutor in Ecuador later called us and said, these guys were just about to launch their major campaign to advertise pedophiles around the world come here to this hotel. He's like, so you guys, we rescued thousands of kids who never will know they were rescued, right? They never were hurt. So that was all filmed because, we're trying to do a little documentary on Ukraine, and all of a sudden the cameras kept following us, and we have something I don't think anyone's ever seen. It's a case I've never done before. And it's called The Hidden War, and it will be coming out probably later this year.
Wow, that's amazing. Unbelievable. And I can't wait to see it, and we'll promote it here on the show. Absolutely. When it comes out. That's amazing work. I just have to ask you about this piece of it, because I've heard reports about the lifespan of these children. And makes me want to cry thinking about it. But to think about the people that you don't help, the kids that you aren't able to save, and the lifespan I've heard is anywhere from maybe 2 to 4 years for these children. And is that sadly where this organ harvesting part of the story comes into this?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's often what happens in these cases. I mean, these kids are brought up to serve, pedophiles. And so once they age out, either they'll usually become work for the organization, or so many things can happen to them. And yes, absolutely, we have, and this is mostly with our work at the Nazarene Fund. We have, for example, in Western Africa, just last year, we took down several what we call baby factories. So what they do is they kidnap usually mentally challenged, mentally disabled young women, and they rape them incessantly, so they're pregnant incessantly. And they have these babies. They take the babies, and the babies are either used for, and these are just, I'm talking days old, and they're then taken and used for the witch doctory, crazy, this satanic ritualistic stuff. They're used for pedophiles, or they're probably more than the other two used to sell their organs. I mean, you can sell a pediatric heart on the black market for about $250,000. And people will buy that because they don't want to wait in line. And so we took down these organizations. The same thing happened in the Middle East. ISIS was using the same evil acts to fund their operations, especially after they got pushed out of any kind of sovereign territory. And so we've been working in dismantling organ harvesting rings there as well. But it's everywhere. We've seen it in Haiti too, and like when they lose their usefulness, they're not people to these traffickers. They're like cattle. They're nothing. And if you're sick, we've had reports of they just kill the child right there, or use them for their organs. So it's messy. It's horrible. It's evil. And thank you for even asking the question. Very few people will ask these questions, because it is so hard to talk about, but not talking about it just pushes further back the solution.
Well, we have a saying on here on this show. In fact, we have T-shirts on this show that says silence equals complicity. And so whether it's war, whether it's anything like this, we have to shine a light on the darkest part of this to try to fix it, to try to solve it. It's just awful. And so, and that's why this is so great that this movie is coming out, The Sound of Freedom, on July 4th, and Jim Caviezel, Mira Sorvino are going to be in this movie shining a light on this at a big level, where people can actually see this and realize that this is not fake, this is real. How did this movie come about? Maybe if you just want to share a little bit about how this movie came about, and how did Jim Caviezel come to this project? I'm sure you've had a lot of interaction with him as he really sort of picked your brain about what this life is like.
Yeah. So one of our very first operations, the one that I told you that we left for, and it led to an operation on October 11th, 2014 in an island off of Cartagena, Colombia. it was actually a part of a 3-part operation. The movie depicts 54 kids being rescued. It was actually well over 120. There's a documentary coming out about that. It's going to follow in the wake of Sound of Freedom called Triple Take, which tells that story. But it got a lot of attention. Scott Pelley reported on it in CBS News, and that thing kind of went viral. We were brand new, so we didn't really know what to do with the media attention. But we started getting calls from production companies, and we visited with quite a few because they said, "What's the story? What's it about?" We turned, like, my wife was in charge to say yes or no, because that's a scary thing. We don't know this world, and we didn't trust that world. She said no to the first 3 inquiries about it, until about 6 months later we've met the producers of Sound of Freedom, and they came and we saw their work. We loved it. We loved them. They're amazing people, and they said, we want to make you an offer. We want to tell your story. So they wrote the script, and that takes a long time. So I kind of lost track of them and thinking, I did some research. It's like 3% of movies that are in concept form go to the screen. So I thought it wasn't going to happen. They came to me in December 2017 and said, we're going to shoot this summer in Colombia, and we need to pick an actor to play you. And you don't get to choose, but you can request. And I said, Jim Caviezel. Get Jim Caviezel. And they balked at that, because they said they want someone that looks a little bit more like me, because they had a plan at the end of the film, which they do. Have you seen it quite yet? Did they send you a screener?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
We'll get you a screener. At the end of the movie, they do a transformation where they kind of they show the actual footage of some of the scenes you saw in the film. And so they said, that's where you guys got to look something like each other. And I said, look, you have to figure that out. But look, as far as I'm concerned, Hollywood is one of the main reasons I even have to work. The smut they're putting out is in fact creating the demand in a lot of ways, and I don't trust that industry. So, but I do know that Jim Caviezel loves Jesus, and that's important to me. Because I know that he will have his head on straight, and he's a phenomenal actor. And Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite movies of all time. So they went to Jim, and he responded in 3 days. I didn't know this. He had adopted 3 children from China. And he had adopted them out of trafficking situations. Wow. So wow. It was very personal to him, and he picked up the script and he just killed it in the film. I mean, he's a very emotional actor. He speaks through his eyes, and that's what this film needed. There's a lot of things that this movie says without saying it, because of the material. I told these guys, if you're going to make this film, don't make one scene, not 3 seconds, that would make a pedophile happy. It would be material, so tell the story without telling it. And they did that very well through just art and lighting and different, just amazing things you'll see in the film. But Caviezel's part of that. He helps you see. I mean, he communicates to the audience more often than not without his mouth. And when you watch the film, you'll see what I mean. Yeah. So he was the right choice.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to see it, and I can't wait for our audience to see it as well. The movie is The Sound of Freedom. It comes out on July 4th. My guest has been Tim Ballard. And Tim, how can people, if they want to help this cause at our rescue, what do people tell us the website? Where can people go to help be a part of this and to solve this problem?
Right now, the ask that we have is to go to angel.com and buy tickets. To angel.com, go buy tickets to Sound of Freedom, and then watch that film and you'll know what to do. And I'd also encourage people to go to the NazareneFund.org, where I'm the CEO. That we're doing that work we talked about with our organ harvesting. And if you remember the Afghani movement, when we pulled out 10,000 people out of Afghanistan in the wake of the abandonment there. So there's a lot of amazing work there. So. But yeah, people need to filter. We want 2 million people in the theaters, representing the 2 million children currently in the commercial sex trade. About 2 million people there on the week of July 4th. And if you go to angel.com, you can buy tickets for your family, but also you can pay it forward and buy tickets for others. So there's been 300,000 tickets purchased already just for other people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford the film. So it's a really cool program. Last I heard yesterday, Sound of Freedom is outselling Indiana Jones 3-1. So what's happening is we're hitting a cap. Our theaters are selling out And there's been many theaters that have sold out, and the trend's continuing. So we're asking people to call your theater and bump Indiana Jones because they're afraid to do it because they don't want to piss off Disney.
Right.
They're like, well, we can't. People want to buy tickets now. But they said if you can get all the other theaters to bump Disney, then then we will, so we don't get targeted later. And so that's what we're asking people, like, buy out theaters, put pressure on the movie theaters, because we don't want to hit that. We're hitting that cap where there's nothing else we can do. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented to have. I think they're close to $3 million in pre-movie tickets. I don't think that they told me it's never happened in the history of movies. People don't buy tickets 2 months before the movie, but in this case they have, and so we're expecting. We hope this trend continues. So thank you for having me on the show, so we can continue to spread this opportunity for people to be informed and then be part of the fight.
Well, my pleasure. So it is angel.com is the website. We'll have it linked up in the description below. And hopefully we can help get the message out about this and the work that you're doing. Tim, a real pleasure to have you here on Redacted. Thank you so much for the work you do and for your time.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And thanks so much, Tim. And we'll have links to everything we talked about in the description of this video a little bit later. So if anyone wants to check out the film or find out where they can go see the film, and also information about the charity as well. So our thanks to Tim for that. And thanks to all of you for subscribing. I can't believe 2 million. It's unbelievable. And thank you to everyone who subscribes on Rumble and on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter. Can you subscribe on Facebook? I guess, I don't know. But I know we're on Twitter. Facebook, I think we post some videos up there occasionally. But anyway, we're really thrilled to be on Twitter and these platforms that really support free speech like Rumble and Twitter. So thank you very much for your support there as well. And don't forget, you can become part of our VIP community. We have a Redacted Rebels VIP community where we publish videos first before anyone else gets to see them. Great content for anybody else. And it's just a way for you to support independent journalism. And for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, that's what it costs to be a Redacted Rebel VIP. So all you need to do is go over to redacted.inc, not .com, go to redacted.inc and put in your email address and you can sign up. And again, if you want to support independent journalism, you can do it there by supporting our show. So we're able to keep the lights on and be able to bring you great interviews and great content day in and day out with our team here at Redacted. So much love to all of you guys. Thank you guys so much for finding us, being a part of our great community. And we will be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time live. So you can join our live show tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great night, everyone.